Long before the Bible, the Quran, or the Greek epics, the world's first gods walked the earth not in the heavens, but in the marshes and rivers of ancient Mesopotamia. Picture this, a time when the universe was nothing but swirling chaos, and from those dark waters rose deities so powerful, their stories would shape empires, inspire kings, and echo through thousands of years of human history. These aren't just myths, they're the blueprints of civilization itself, whispered by Sumerian priests, carved into Akkadian tablets, and sung by Babylonian scribes. What if I told you that every story you've ever heard about creation, every flood, every garden, every battle between order and chaos traces its roots back to these ancient tales? The Mesopotamians didn't just imagine their gods, they lived alongside them, feared them, and built towering ziggurats to reach them. And today, we're about to unravel 50 of their most astonishing stories, from the primordial mother Nammu, who birthed the cosmos from her watery depths, to the storm god Enlil, who split heaven and earth with a single act of rebellion. You'll hear how humans were molded from divine blood and clay, how a dragon's corpse became the fabric of the world, and how love, war, and betrayal among the gods mirrored the rise and fall of history's first cities. These myths didn't just vanish into dust, they traveled hidden in the laws of Hammurabi, woven into the Psalms of the Bible, even lurking in the constellations we still name today. So if you've ever wondered where the oldest stories of creation began, or why they still matter, keep watching. By the end of this journey, you won't just know the gods of Mesopotamia, you'll understand how they invented the very idea of the divine. Now, let us wade into the very first whispers of creation where everything began, not with light or land, but with endless, churning waters. Before gods ruled the heavens or walked the earth, there was only Nammu, the primordial sea. Imagine a darkness so vast it had no edges, a watery abyss where time itself had not yet begun to flow. The Sumerians called her the mother without a mother, the one who existed before existence had a name. From her depths, the first divine spark flickered to life. Nammu was more than just water, she was the womb of the cosmos. In the ancient Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest surviving creation texts, she is described as the source from which all things emerged. The gods themselves were born from her like ripples spreading across an infinite ocean. She had no temples, no statues, for how do you build a shrine to that which was already everywhere? Yet her presence was undeniable, the foundation upon which all of creation would rise. What makes Nammu so fascinating is how she embodies the Sumerian understanding of beginnings. Unlike later myths where creation is an act of speech or battle, here it is a quiet, inevitable unfolding life emerging from the waters as naturally as a river carves its own path. She is chaos, yes, but not the destructive kind. Hers is the chaos of potential, the unshaped clay waiting for the hands of gods to mold it. And from her, the first divine pair would emerge on the heavens and Kai, the earth, setting the stage for everything that followed. So when you think of creation, don't just picture a single moment of divine command. Picture Nammu, the endless sea, the first mother whose name means the deep. She reminds us that even in the oldest stories, life begins where the water meets the unknown. From the boundless waters of Nammu, the cosmos took its first true shape, not as a single entity but as a divine pair. Picture the moment when the primordial unity split, like a curtain drawn to reveal the stage of existence, and the heavens and Kai, the earth, emerged from the depths, their separation marking the birth of structure in the universe. This was no mere division, it was the foundation upon which all of creation would stand. In Mesopotamian belief, An and Kai were more than just places or elements. They were living deities, embodiments of the sky above and the ground below, and stretched endlessly upward, a vault of stars and storms, while Kai lay firm beneath, the solid ground that would nurture life. Yet they were never truly apart. Their union, a sacred intertwining of heaven and earth, became the source of new gods, each born from their cosmic embrace. Enlil, the storm god, was among their first offspring, destined to wield immense power. The symbolism here runs deep. An and Kai represent the essential duality of existence, the interplay between the boundless and the tangible, the eternal and the earthly. Their separation didn't create distance, it created balance. The heavens nourished the earth with rain, while the earth reached toward the heavens with mountains and trees. Together, they formed a cycle of giving and receiving, a harmony that would echo through every myth that followed. This divine pair also reflects the Mesopotamian view of order emerging from chaos. Where Nammu was the formless potential and Enki gave that potential shape, their story isn't just about creation, it's about relationship. Even as distinct entities, they remained connected, their union a reminder that nothing in the cosmos exists in isolation. From their bond came the pantheon, the laws of nature, and the very framework of reality. So when you look up at the sky or feel the earth beneath your feet, remember, you're standing in the space where heaven and earth first met. Now, let's turn our attention to the moment when the balance of the cosmos shifted, when Enlil, the storm god, stepped forward to claim his destiny. Born from the union of An and Kai, Enlil was no ordinary deity. His very essence was tied to the raw power of nature, the howling winds and crashing storms that shaped the world. But his greatest act would come when he made a decision that reshaped creation itself. He separated his parents, An and Kai, pulling heaven and earth apart to establish order in the universe. This wasn't just a physical division, it was a cosmic necessity. Before Enlil's intervention, heaven and earth were locked in an endless embrace, leaving no space for life to flourish. By drawing them apart, Enlil created the air, the realm where he would reign as king of the gods. Imagine the force required to part the sky from the earth, a feat that cemented his status as the supreme authority in the pantheon. From that moment on, Enlil's word carried divine weight, his decrees shaping the fate of gods and mortals alike. The myth of Enlil and Ninhursag offers a glimpse into his complex nature. In one tale, Enlil's impulsive actions lead to his banishment to the underworld, only for him to return stronger, proving that even the gods must face consequences. Yet his connection to storms and winds never waned. When Enlil spoke, the skies answered. His breath became the gusts that scattered seeds, his anger the tempests that leveled cities. He was both life-giver and destroyer, a reminder of nature's dual power. As king of the gods, Enlil governed more than just the weather. He presided over the divine assembly where decisions about the cosmos were made. His role was to maintain Ma'at, the Mesopotamian concept of order, ensuring that chaos never reclaimed the world he helped structure. Under his rule, the gods found their domains, and humanity learned to navigate a world where wind could nurture or devastate. Enlil's rise wasn't just about power, it was about responsibility. His separation of An and Kai didn't just create space, it created possibility. Every storm that follows, every breeze that stirs the air, echoes that pivotal moment when Enlil took his place as the force that holds the world together. But the gods soon faced a problem of their own making. With the universe now ordered under Enlil's rule, the lesser gods, the Igigi, grew weary of their endless labor, toiling to maintain the world the deities had shaped. Their exhaustion would set in motion one of the most pivotal moments in Mesopotamian mythology, the creation of humanity. Enter Enki, the god of wisdom and waters, and Ninhursag, the mother goddess. Together, they would craft a solution both ingenious and profound. According to the Atrahasis epic, the Igigi rebelled against their backbreaking work, refusing to dig canals or tend the earth any longer. The divine assembly, led by Enlil, needed a new workforce, one that could bear the burdens the gods no longer wished to carry. Enki, ever the clever strategist, proposed a radical idea. Why not fashion beings from clay mixed with the blood of a slain god? This divine essence would give them life while their earthly form would bind them to labor. The gods agreed, and Ninhursag took center stage, shaping the first humans with her skilled hands. As the mother of all living things, she breathed vitality into the clay, while Enki's wisdom ensured these new creatures would be capable of serving the gods' needs. But this wasn't just a story of servitude. The myth reveals deeper layers: humanity's divine spark, inherited from the sacrificed god, and their intimate connection to the earth itself. Ninhursag's nurturing touch balanced Enki's cunning, making humans both resilient and resourceful. And though they were created to work, they carried within them a fragment of the divine, a reminder that even in service, they were part of the god's grand design. The Atrahasis epic doesn't shy away from the darker implications: humanity's mortality, their struggles, and the gods' occasional wrath, yet it also highlights Enki's compassion. When the gods later sought to destroy humans with a great flood, it was Enki who secretly warned the righteous Atrahasis, ensuring survival. This duality, creation and destruction, wisdom and rebellion, shaped humanity's role in the cosmos, a legacy forged from clay and divine blood. Now, let's turn our attention to Enki's grander vision, his role as the divine architect of civilization itself. While he helped create humanity to ease the gods' burdens, his influence stretched far beyond that single act. Enki was the master organizer, the one who brought structure to the chaotic beauty of the world. From his watery sanctuary, the Abzu, he carefully assigned domains to each deity, ensuring every force of nature and aspect of society had its divine overseer. The Abzu wasn't just a home, it was the sacred underground ocean, a place of primordial wisdom where fresh waters bubbled up to nourish the earth. Here, Enki's brilliance flourished. He didn't just distribute responsibilities among the gods, he gifted humanity with the foundations of civilization. Imagine him as the ultimate inventor, bestowing the arts of writing, agriculture, medicine, and craftsmanship upon mortals. These weren't just practical skills, they were divine secrets carefully passed down to elevate human life. But Enki's wisdom carried a touch of magic. Known for his cleverness, he often used trickery and wit to navigate conflicts among the gods, earning him a reputation as both a peacemaker and a schemer. His association with magic wasn't about raw power, it was about knowledge, the kind that could bend fate itself. Rituals, incantations, and the sacred me, those divine decrees we discussed earlier, all fell under his domain. What makes Enki truly fascinating is his duality. He was a god of order, yet he thrived in the fluid, unpredictable depths of the Abzu. He championed humanity, yet he answered to the divine assembly. And while he brought structure to the world, he never lost his playful, unpredictable edge. This balance between wisdom and cunning, creation and chaos, is what cemented his legacy as Mesopotamia's divine craftsman. Next, we'll see how this delicate order faced its first major test, when the Igigi gods rebelled against their endless toil, a crisis that would once again call upon Enki's ingenuity. But even the gods themselves were not immune to exhaustion and discontent. The Igigi, the lesser deities who toiled endlessly under the harsh labor demanded by the higher gods, finally reached their breaking point. Day after day, they dug canals, hauled water, and maintained the earth's foundations, backbreaking work with no relief in sight. Their suffering grew until it erupted into open rebellion. The Igigi cast down their tools, refusing to serve any longer. They surrounded the great temple of Enlil, their anger so fierce it shook the heavens. This was no minor dispute, it was a full-scale divine uprising, a challenge to the very order the gods had established. The higher gods, caught off guard, faced a crisis. Without the Igigi's labor, the world would crumble into chaos. Enter Enki, the clever problem solver. As tensions reached a boiling point, he proposed a radical solution: create a new being to shoulder the Igigi's burdens. Humanity would be fashioned from clay, mixed with the blood of a slain god, Kingu, Tiamat's rebellious general. To give them life and purpose, This wasn't just about convenience, it was a divine compromise, a way to restore balance without crushing the Igigi spirit. But beneath the myth lies a striking allegory. The Igigi's rebellion mirrors the struggles of laborers throughout history, oppressed workers rising against those who exploit them. The creation of humans, then, becomes more than just a divine act. It's a commentary on power, hierarchy, and the cost of maintaining order. Even in the realm of gods, the tension between rulers and the ruled shaped destiny. And so, with humanity's creation, the gods found their solution, but as we'll soon see, this new chapter would bring its own complications. The stage was set for a world where mortals and gods coexisted, bound by duty and divine will. Now, as humanity took its place in the world, the gods knew these new beings needed more than just strength to labor. They needed order, purpose, and the very foundations of civilization. Enter the Me, the sacred divine decrees bestowed by Enki, the god of wisdom. These weren't just rules, they were the building blocks of society itself, the invisible threads weaving together everything from justice to craftsmanship. Imagine the Me as a divine blueprint, a collection of over 100 principles that defined what it meant to be civilized. Kingship, truth, weaving, music, even the art of writing, all flowed from these decrees. Enki, ever the benefactor, didn't hoard this knowledge. He entrusted it to humanity, ensuring cities could rise, laws could be upheld, and culture could flourish. Take kingship, for example. The Me didn't just declare that rulers should exist, it outlined the very essence of leadership, the right to govern, the duty to protect, and the sacred bond between ruler and people. Truth wasn't merely a virtue, it was a cosmic law woven into the fabric of daily life, from courtroom oaths to temple rituals. Even something as seemingly simple as weaving carried divine weight, transforming raw wool into garments that clothed society, both literally and symbolically. But the Me weren't static, they were dynamic, evolving with humanity's needs. When Inanna, the ambitious goddess of love and war, sought to elevate her city of Uruk, she didn't ask for weapons or gold, she demanded the Me from Enki. Through wit and persuasion, she secured them, proving these decrees were as much about power as they were about progress. In the end, the Me were more than divine gifts, they were a covenant. They showed that civilization wasn't just built by human hands but guided by divine wisdom, a reminder that even in a world of mortals and gods, order and creativity were forever intertwined. And as we'll see, this delicate balance would face its greatest test in the tales to come. Yet ambition has its own path, and none knew this better than Inanna, the radiant goddess of love and war. Not content with her existing domains, she set her sights on something far greater. The Me, the very essence of civilization held by Enki in his watery abode, the Abzu. This wasn't just a quest for power, it was a daring gamble to reshape the world. Inanna knew Enki wouldn't part with the Me willingly, so she arrived at the Abzu not as a conqueror but as a charming guest. Flattery flowed like wine as she toasted Enki's wisdom, loosening his guard with each cup. The god of wisdom, though cunning, underestimated her determination. As the night wore on, Enki, swayed by her praise, began gifting her the sacred decrees, kingship, the art of the scribe, the rituals of temples, one by one until she held them all. By dawn, the trick was complete. Inanna fled with the Me loaded onto her celestial boat, racing back to Uruk before Enki could sober up and realize his loss. When he finally awoke, chaos erupted. Enki sent demons to reclaim the stolen treasures, but Inanna outmaneuvered them at every turn, protected by her loyal servant Ninhursag. The chase became a testament to her wit, proving that power wasn't just taken, it was earned through strategy. In the end, the Me found a new home in Uruk, transforming it into a beacon of culture and authority. This tale isn't just about theft. It's about the restless hunger for progress, the audacity to challenge the old order, and the undeniable truth that knowledge once shared can never truly be reclaimed. And as we'll soon see, this shift in power would ripple through the heavens, setting the stage for even greater divine dramas ahead. But even as Inanna's triumph reshaped the world, another story was unfolding, one of love, duty, and the fragile balance between life and death. The sacred marriage of Dumuzid and Inanna was more than a divine romance. It was the heartbeat of Mesopotamia itself, a ritual woven into the very fabric of the land's survival. Dumuzid, the shepherd god, embodied the fertile abundance of the earth, while Inanna, ever radiant, brought the passion of the heavens. Their union was celebrated in grand ceremonies where kings would step into Dumuzid's role, marrying priestesses who channeled Inanna. These rituals weren't just symbolic, they were believed to renew the land's fertility, ensuring bountiful harvests and prosperity for the people. The joy of their wedding echoed through temples and fields alike, a promise of life's endless cycle. Yet, as with all great myths, shadows lingered beneath the light. Other tales whispered of Dumuzid's fate, how he would one day descend into the underworld, a sacrifice to balance the scales of life and death. Even in their happiest moments, the threads of tragedy were already spun, a reminder that nothing, not even divine love, escapes the turn of fate. This sacred marriage wasn't just a story. It was a mirror held up to humanity's deepest hopes and fears, where joy and sorrow walked hand in hand. And as we'll soon see, the consequences of this union would ripple far beyond the wedding feast, shaping destinies even the gods couldn't foresee. But as the echoes of Dumuzid and Inanna's sacred marriage faded, another storm was brewing in the primordial depths, one that would shake the very foundations of the divine order. The slaying of Apsu marks a turning point in Mesopotamian mythology, where the old gives way to the new and chaos threatens to consume creation itself. Apsu, the ancient god of freshwater, and his mate Tiamat, the saltwater dragon, were the first beings to emerge from the void. Together, they birthed generations of younger gods whose laughter and energy filled the cosmos. But to Apsu, their noise became unbearable. He saw their vitality as a threat, a disruption to the stillness of primordial times. So he plotted with Tiamat to destroy their own children, to return the universe to silence. Enter E, the god of wisdom and magic. Hearing of Apsu's plan, he acted swiftly, weaving a powerful spell that lulled Apsu into a deep sleep. Then, with cold precision, E slew the ancient god, claiming his watery domain as his own. This act wasn't just a victory, it was a revolution. The younger gods had overthrown the old, but at a terrible cost. Tiamat, once a nurturing force, was now consumed by grief and rage. Her sorrow would soon twist into a vengeance so fierce it would nearly unravel creation itself. This myth isn't just about gods and monsters. It's a timeless tale of generational conflict where the old resist change and the young fight for their place in the world. The slaying of Apsu sets the stage for an even greater battle, one where the fate of the cosmos hangs in the balance. And as we'll see, Tiamat's wrath would demand a hero unlike any the gods had ever known. Now, as the divine drama unfolds, a new champion emerges from the shadows, one whose very existence would redefine the balance of power among the gods. The birth of Marduk was no ordinary event. Even among deities, his arrival was nothing short of miraculous. From the moment he drew his first breath, Marduk stood apart. His body radiated an otherworldly presence, 4 piercing eyes that saw all, 4 attentive ears that heard every whisper, and a flaming aura that lit up the heavens. This was no mere god, this was a force of destiny, born to E, the cunning god of wisdom, and Damkina, the nurturing earth goddess. Marduk inherited the best of both worlds, his father's strategic brilliance and his mother's unshakable strength. What's truly remarkable is how quickly Marduk rose to prominence. In a pantheon where age often dictated power, this younger god shattered expectations. His wisdom rivaled Enki's, his authority challenged Enlil's, and his raw power soon made even the eldest gods take notice. But why? Because Marduk embodied something the cosmos desperately needed, a unifying force capable of facing the chaos Tiamat's wrath would unleash. This wasn't just the birth of a god, it was the dawn of a new era, and as we'll soon see, Marduk's extraordinary gifts would be put to the ultimate test when the fate of creation itself hung in the balance. But destiny waits for no god, and soon Marduk would face the greatest challenge of his young divinity. The time had come for the ultimate showdown, a battle so monumental it would reshape existence itself. Tiamat, the primordial dragon of chaos, had declared war on the gods. Enraged by the murder of her mate Apsu, she raised an army of monstrous creatures, birthing 11 terrifying beasts to devour the divine order. The heavens trembled as she prepared to drown creation in endless night. The gods were paralyzed with fear until Marduk stepped forward. With the authority of the divine assembly behind him, he armed himself with winds as weapons, lightning as his arrows, and a net woven from the fabric of fate itself. The Enuma Elish paints this moment with thunderous poetry. He set the lightning before him, with burning flame he filled his body. As the two forces clashed, the cosmos held its breath. Tiamat opened her jaws to swallow Marduk whole, but the young god was quicker. He hurled the winds down her throat, swelling her body until she couldn't move. Then, with a single decisive strike, Marduk drove his spear into her heart, ending her reign of terror. But this was more than just victory, it was transformation. From her corpse, Marduk crafted the very fabric of reality. He split her body like a clamshell, raising half to form the vault of heaven, anchoring the stars and leaving the other half to become the earth. Her weeping eyes became the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, her saliva the clouds that would bring rain. This wasn't merely a battle, it was the birth of the world as the Mesopotamians knew it. And in that moment, Marduk didn't just prove his strength, he became the architect of order, the unshakable pillar holding chaos at bay. The echoes of this cosmic struggle would resonate through every temple hymn, every king's coronation for millennia to come. Now, as the dust of battle settled, Marduk stood before the remains of the fallen chaos dragon, not just as a conqueror, but as a creator. With divine vision, he saw the potential in Tiamat's lifeless form, transforming her monstrous body into the very foundations of the world. Her arched ribs became the vault of heaven, stretched across the cosmos like a celestial dome. Her flesh was molded into the earth, solid and enduring. And in a touch of poetic symmetry, her weeping eyes gave birth to the twin rivers Tigris and Euphrates, their waters flowing like tears across the land she once sought to destroy. But Marduk's work didn't stop there. He anchored the stars to her ribcage, assigning constellations their paths to mark time and destiny. Her saliva became the clouds, her severed tail the Milky Way. Every part of her, once a weapon of chaos, was repurposed with meticulous care. This wasn't just recycling, it was alchemy, turning violence into order, terror into structure. What's fascinating is how this mirrors other creation myths across cultures. The Babylonian tale echoes the Norse story of Ymir, whose dismembered body forms the world, or the Chinese giant Pangu, whose limbs became mountains and breathed the wind. Even the biblical concept of Leviathan, the primordial sea monster, carries whispers of Tiamat's legacy. These parallels suggest a shared human impulse to explain the world's origins through the triumph of order over chaos, a theme as old as storytelling itself. Marduk's act of cosmic craftsmanship didn't just shape rivers and skies, it set a template. Kings would later imitate his divine order in their cities, priests would chant of his victory in temples, and every spring flood would be seen as an echo of Tiamat's subdued power. The world, as the Mesopotamians knew it, was now complete, but the story of its gods was far from over. Now, with the heavens firmly anchored to Tiamat's ribs, Marduk turned his attention to the stars, scattered like seeds across the night sky. But these weren't just random specks of light. To the Babylonians, they were divine signposts, and Marduk's next act of creation would give them meaning. With deliberate precision, he grouped the stars into constellations, each one a celestial marker to guide both gods and mortals. The Babylonians didn't just see pictures in the stars, they saw a cosmic clock. The movement of constellations like the Lion, the Scorpion, and the Great Twins became the world's first calendar, tracking seasons for planting and harvest. Farmers knew when to sow their fields by the rise of the Bull of Heaven, and priests timed sacred festivals by the shifting paths of these celestial beasts. But the stars held deeper secrets too. The Babylonians believed the gods inscribed fate in the heavens, and by reading the stars they could glimpse divine will. This was the birth of astrology, a science so advanced that even today, our zodiac signs trace their roots back to Babylonian star charts. What's remarkable is how much of their knowledge still shapes our skies. The 12 constellations of the zodiac, Babylonian inventions, the idea that celestial events predict earthly ones, a concept they perfected over centuries of observation. Their astronomers mapped planetary movements with startling accuracy, laying the groundwork for modern astronomy. For them, the stars weren't just decorations, they were the handwriting of the gods, a language Marduk himself had arranged. Yet this celestial order wasn't just about prediction. It reflected the Babylonian belief in a universe governed by divine laws, where even the stars obeyed Marduk's command. Kings claimed their authority from these heavenly patterns, and temples aligned with constellations to mirror cosmic harmony. The zodiac wasn't just a tool, it was proof that chaos had been tamed, and that humanity, under the watchful eyes of the gods, belonged to something vast and meaningful. And as the stars continued their endless dance, another chapter of creation was about to unfold, one that would bind humanity to the gods in the most intimate way yet. But the stars weren't the only creation born from Tiamat's defeat. As the dust of battle settled, Marduk faced another challenge, one that would shape the fate of both gods and mortals. Among the fallen was Kingu, Tiamat's fearsome general and second husband, who had led her armies against the younger gods. His fate, however, would become the cornerstone of humanity's origin. Marduk saw in Kingu's blood a potent material, a divine essence mixed with rebellion. According to the Enuma Elish, he gathered the defeated general's blood and mixed it with clay, shaping the first humans. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was alchemy. The divine blood granted humans a spark of the god's vitality, while the clay bound them to the earth. Yet there was a catch: humanity's very existence was tied to servitude. The gods, weary from their labors, needed beings to tend the world so they could rest. This myth reveals a profound duality in Mesopotamian thought. Humans were both sacred and subordinate, carrying the divine within them yet destined to toil. Unlike other creation stories where humans are an afterthought, here they're born from conflict, their essence forged in the aftermath of cosmic war. Kingu's blood symbolized more than just raw material. It was a transfer of power, a reminder that even in defeat, chaos left its mark on creation, and so humanity's role was sealed. They would build temples, offer sacrifices, and sustain the gods through worship, a cycle of mutual dependence. But this wasn't just about subjugation. The Enuma Elish suggests that by serving the gods, humans participated in maintaining cosmic order, their labor echoing Marduk's own victory over chaos. It's a poignant origin, one where mortality and divinity intertwine, setting the stage for countless stories of human ambition, suffering, and resilience in the face of the divine. With humanity now part of the grand design, the gods turned their attention to another pressing question: how to govern this fragile new order. As the gods shaped the world above, another realm was taking form, one hidden beneath the earth where light never reached. This was Ereshkigal, the Mesopotamian underworld, and its ruler was Ereshkigal, the formidable queen of the dead. Unlike her sister Inanna, who thrived in the world of the living, Ereshkigal's power lay in the shadows, where she governed with unchallenged authority. Her dominion began with a twist of fate. Originally a sky goddess, Ereshkigal was dragged into the underworld by the dragon Kur, and over time she transformed from a captive to its sovereign. The gods themselves recognized her rule, decreeing that all souls, mortal and divine, would one day pass through her gates. Ereshkigal was no temporary resting place. It was a final destination, a land of no return. Life, or rather existence, in Ereshkigal was bleak. Souls wandered through endless dust, their voices reduced to whispers. There was no sunlight, no fresh water, only stale bread and muddy drink to sustain them. Even the mightiest kings and heroes, stripped of their glory, became equal in this joyless realm. The dead wore feathers like birds, a haunting symbol of their weightless, forgotten state. Yet Ereshkigal's rule wasn't mindless cruelty. She maintained order in a realm that balanced the cosmos. Without her, the dead might overwhelm the living and chaos could seep back into creation. Her harshness was necessity. This was the price of mortality, the flip side of the vibrant world above. And as we'll soon see, even the Queen of the Dead wasn't immune to the upheavals of divine politics. Her story takes another dramatic turn when a certain plague god arrives at her gates, but that's a tale for another time. But the underworld was not destined to remain under Ereshkigal's sole rule forever. Enter Nergal, the fearsome god of plague and war, whose arrival would turn Ereshkigal's quiet despair into something far more unpredictable. It all began with a divine banquet where the gods gathered to feast, all except Ereshkigal, who could not leave her dark domain. Out of courtesy, they sent Nergal to deliver her portion. But when he arrived at Ereshkigal's gates, something unexpected happened. Instead of bowing before the Queen of the Dead as protocol demanded, Nergal met her gaze with defiance. He refused to kneel, refused to show submission. Ereshkigal, unaccustomed to such boldness, was furious yet intrigued. She ordered Nergal to stay, but he escaped, fleeing back to the world above. Enraged, she demanded his return, threatening to unleash the dead upon the living if the gods did not send him back. The Pantheon, fearing her wrath, convinced Nergal to face her again, but this time he came prepared. Armed with 14 demons, Nergal stormed the underworld, not as a supplicant but as a conqueror. He overpowered Ereshkigal's guards, seized her by the hair, and dragged her from her throne, ready to strike the final blow. Yet in that moment, something shifted. Instead of killing her, he pulled her close, and for 6 days they shared a passion as fierce as their battle. When the week ended, Nergal did something no one expected. He stayed, not as a prisoner, not as a usurper, but as Ereshkigal's equal. The gods, recognizing the balance they had forged, decreed that Nergal would rule beside her for half the year, bringing a strange new energy to the land of the dead. This was no simple love story. It was a clash of wills, a merging of opposites, destruction and order, plague and death, the tempest above and the stillness below. Together, they reshaped Ereshkigal's fate, proving that even in the underworld, power could be shared, and passion could bloom in the unlikeliest of places. And so, the realm of the dead gained a second ruler, a god who brought fire to the shadows, but that was only the beginning of the underworld's transformations. Now, let us turn our attention to a quieter but no less significant moment in Inanna's story, one that reveals her patience and foresight. Long before she became the queen of heaven and earth, the goddess was just a young deity with ambitions as vast as the sky. And it all began with a single tree, in the sacred garden of the gods where the waters of creation still whispered their ancient secrets. A hulapu tree took root. This was no ordinary tree. Its branches reached for the heavens, its roots plunged deep into the underworld, and its trunk stood as a bridge between realms. But when storms battered its young form and serpents coiled around its roots, the tree struggled to grow. That was when Inanna, still in the early days of her divinity, saw its potential. She tended to the hulapu with care, watering its roots and guarding it from harm. Years passed, and as the tree grew tall and strong, so too did Inanna's own power. When the time was right, she knew exactly what to do. With the help of the hero Gilgamesh, she had the tree felled not to destroy it but to transform it. From its wood, she crafted a throne and a bed, sacred objects that would become symbols of her authority. The throne represented her right to rule, a seat from which she would one day judge mortals and gods alike. The bed symbolized her role as the goddess of love and fertility, where sacred unions would be celebrated. This myth is more than just a story about a tree. It's a tale of growth, both literal and divine. Inanna's patience in nurturing the Hulapu mirrors her own journey from a young goddess to a sovereign of the cosmos. And just as the tree connected heaven, earth, and the underworld, so too would Inanna's influence eventually span all realms. But her story was far from over. With her symbols of power now forged, Inanna's next steps would lead her to even greater challenges and greater triumphs. Now, shifting our focus from Inanna's rise to power, we encounter another pivotal figure in Mesopotamian mythology, Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters. While Inanna's story is one of ambition and transformation, Enki's tale is one of meticulous order and divine governance. Enki, known as the cleverest of the gods, didn't just possess wisdom, he used it to shape the very fabric of the world. Imagine a grand cosmic blueprint where every river, mountain, and city had its rightful place and purpose. That was Enki's masterpiece. He didn't create chaos or conquer through force. Instead, he organized, assigned, and balanced the domains of the gods with the precision of a master architect. Take the Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamia's life-giving rivers. Enki didn't merely summon them into existence, he appointed deities to oversee their flow, ensuring the waters nourished the land and its people. Mountains weren't just towering landforms, they became sacred spaces guarded by specific gods, their peaks touching the heavens. Even cities like Eridu, the first settlement believed to be founded by the gods, were placed under divine protection, with Enki himself ruling its temple, the Abzu. But Enki's role went beyond mere delegation. He was the divine administrator, the one who resolved disputes among the gods and maintained harmony in the cosmos. When conflicts arose over territory or resources, it was Enki who stepped in with solutions, his wisdom preventing chaos from unraveling the order he had established. This systematic approach wasn't just about control. It reflected the Sumerians' deep reverence for balance and structure. Enki's world ordering was a divine mirror of their own societal values, where roles were clearly defined and every element of existence had its place. And as we'll soon see, this carefully arranged world would face its share of challenges, testing Enki's wisdom and the stability he had crafted. Now, as we journey forward from Enki's orderly world, we arrive at the transformation of a goddess whose influence stretched far beyond her Sumerian roots, Ishtar. While Inanna was revered in Sumer as the queen of heaven and love, her Akkadian counterpart, Ishtar, took on even grander dimensions, blending familiar traits with striking new powers that reflected the evolving beliefs of Assyria and Babylon. Ishtar inherited much from Inanna, her association with love, fertility, and the planet Venus, but the Akkadians and later Babylonians amplified her role, casting her as a fierce warrior and a cosmic force. Where Inanna wielded charm and cunning, Ishtar brandished weapons, leading armies into battle and standing alongside gods like Marduk as a protector of kingdoms. She wasn't just a goddess of desire, she was a sovereign of war, her dual nature embodying both creation and destruction. This expansion of her identity wasn't merely symbolic. In Assyrian myths, Ishtar's warrior aspect became central to royal ideology. Kings invoked her name before battles, crediting her with their victories, while her celestial connection as the morning and evening star linked her to divine omens and the rhythms of fate. Babylon, meanwhile, elevated her further, intertwining her myths with Marduk's rise, transforming her into a pivotal figure in the Enuma Elish, where she both challenged and collaborated with the gods. Yet, even as her roles multiplied, traces of Inanna's essence remained. The sacred marriage rite, once central to Inanna's cult, persisted in Ishtar's worship, though now infused with political undertones, legitimizing rulers through divine union. And just as Inanna descended to the underworld, so too did Ishtar face its terrors, but with even greater consequences, as her absence threatened to halt all life on Earth. What makes Ishtar's evolution so fascinating is how it mirrors the cultures that revered her. As Mesopotamia's empires grew, so did her dominion, adapting to serve new needs while preserving the core of who she'd always been. And as we'll see next, this adaptability wasn't unique to Ishtar. It was a testament to the living, breathing nature of Mesopotamian mythology itself. Now, shifting our focus from the celestial to the earthly, we come to a myth that shaped the very foundation of Mesopotamian life, the divine gift of the plow. In a land where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers brought both life and challenge, agriculture wasn't just a livelihood, it was a sacred act blessed by the gods themselves. According to ancient texts, the plow wasn't a human invention but a divine tool bestowed by the gods to tame the wild earth. Enlil, the storm god who governed both winds and order, was often credited with its creation, fashioning the first plow from the heavens and placing it in the hands of farmers. But it was Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters, who taught humanity how to use it, channeling the river's floods into fertile furrows, turning chaos into abundance. This myth wasn't just about practicality. It was deeply tied to the cycles of nature and the rituals that sustained them. Each spring, as the snow melted in the distant mountains, priests reenacted the plow's first sacred journey, guiding oxen-drawn plows in ceremonies that mirrored the god's original act. These rites honored Ninurta, the agricultural god who protected crops, and Nisaba, the goddess of grain, whose blessings ensured the earth would yield its bounty. The plow's symbolism extended even further. Its blade cutting the soil mirrored the separation of heaven and earth in creation myths, while the seed sown represented the promise of renewal. A cycle of death and rebirth echoed in stories like Dumuzin's descent to the underworld. To the Mesopotamians, farming wasn't just labor. It was a partnership with the divine, a way to sustain both body and soul. And as we'll see next, this sacred relationship between gods and humanity didn't end in the fields. It extended to the very walls of their cities, where divine order took stone and mortar form. From the sacred furrows of the plow, we now turn to the rise of mighty walls and bustling streets where the gods didn't just shape the land, but built the very idea of civilization itself. According to Mesopotamian belief, cities weren't merely human achievements, they were divine blueprints brought to life. Eridu, nestled where the fresh waters of the Abzu met the earth, was said to be the first city ever created, its foundations laid by none other than Enki himself. Ancient texts describe it as the city of the first kings, where the gods established the model for all future urban life. Temples here weren't just buildings, they were cosmic anchors connecting heaven and earth. The Abzu, Enki's temple, stood as a sacred prototype, its design whispered by the gods to mortal architects. But Eridu was only the beginning. Other great cities like Uruk, and Nippur soon followed, each ordained by different deities as centers of their power. Inanna claimed Uruk as her domain, filling its streets with artistry and trade, while Enlil made Nippur the heart of divine law, a place where even kings journeyed to seek his blessing. These cities weren't random settlements, they were mirrors of the god's will, their layouts and rituals reflecting celestial order. What's fascinating is how these myths align with history. Archaeologists confirm Eridu as one of the earliest urban centers, its layers of temples matching the legendary first foundation. The Mesopotamians saw their cities as living extensions of creation itself, where every brick upheld divine harmony, and every gate marked a threshold between the mortal and the eternal. And as we'll soon discover, these urban sanctuaries didn't just house gods, they became stages for humanity's next great collaboration with the divine, the crafting of laws to govern their sacred order. Now, from the towering walls of sacred cities, we journey to the open pastures where another kind of divine gift took root, one that shaped the daily lives of Mesopotamians just as profoundly. Here we meet Dumuzid, the shepherd god, whose gentle hands guided not just flocks but the very art of animal husbandry itself. Unlike the stormy might of Enlil or the cunning wisdom of Enki, Dumuzid embodied the quiet rhythms of pastoral life. Ancient hymns paint him as the tender caretaker of herds, teaching humanity how to nurture sheep and goats, how to weave their wool into cloth, and how to honor the balance between hunter and nurturer. His presence turned wild landscapes into fertile grounds, where humans learned to live in harmony with the creatures around them. But there's a haunting contrast woven into Dumuzid's myth. This peaceful shepherd, celebrated in spring festivals for bringing abundance, is also the god doomed to spend half the year in the bleak underworld, a fate tied to his marriage to the fiery goddess Inanna. While his days above ground symbolize growth and provision, his descent into Ereshkigal mirrors the harsh cycles of nature, drought following rain, winter after harvest. This duality made Dumuzid one of Mesopotamia's most relatable deities. Farmers and herders saw their own struggles reflected in his story, the joy of a thriving flock, the grief of loss, and the hope for renewal. Rituals honored him not just as a divine teacher but as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest seasons, the pastures would one day bloom again. And as we'll soon see, this interplay between light and shadow in Dumuzid's tale sets the stage for one of Mesopotamian mythology's most dramatic twists, the sacred marriage that would bind him eternally to the whims of the gods. From the pastoral fields tended by Dumuzid, we turn now to the grand courts of Mesopotamia's earliest rulers, where the divine and mortal worlds intertwined in a sacred pact. The Sumerians believed kingship didn't rise from human ambition. It was a gift lowered from the heavens themselves, as recorded in the ancient Sumerian king list. This sacred text traces the lineage of rulers back to a time when gods directly governed humanity, gradually entrusting authority to chosen mortals. At the heart of this myth stands Inanna, the legendary shepherd king of Kish, whose story blurs the line between man and divine intermediary. Ancient tablets describe Inanna as a ruler handpicked by the gods to restore order, yet plagued by a personal crisis, his inability to father an heir. Desperate, he prays to Shamash, the sun god and enforcer of justice, who guides him to rescue a wounded eagle. This eagle, once healed, carries Inanna skyward on a daring ascent to the heavens, where he pleads with the goddess Ishtar for the plant of birth. Though the tale's ending is fragmented, its message is clear. Kingship required divine favor, and even the most exalted rulers depended on the gods' whims. The Sumerian king list reinforces this idea, weaving history and myth into a single narrative. It names rulers who reigned for impossibly long spans, some for tens of thousands of years before the Great Flood reset civilization. These exaggerated reigns symbolized an era when gods walked among humans, gradually shortening their lifespans as authority passed to mortal kings. Post-flood rulers like Gilgamesh, though still part divine, faced human limitations, bridging the old world of god-kings and the new era of human governance. This myth of divine kingship wasn't just folklore, it shaped real politics. Rulers like Nammu and Hammurabi cited their direct communion with gods to legitimize laws and conquests, while temple rituals cast them as stewards of divine will. The king wasn't merely a leader, he was the linchpin between heaven and earth, tasked with maintaining the cosmic order first established by deities like Enlil and Marduk. And as we'll see next, this sacred duty extended beyond politics into the very heart of Mesopotamian worship, where the ritual marriage of kings and goddesses blurred the boundaries between mortal and divine power. Now, let's step into the sacred space where gods and mortals met in a ritual so powerful it shaped the fate of kingdoms, the sacred marriage rite. At the heart of this ceremony was the union of Inanna, the passionate goddess of love and war, and Dumuzid, the shepherd king whose life cycled between fertility and the underworld. Their divine marriage wasn't just a myth, it was a cosmic blueprint reenacted by Mesopotamian rulers to ensure prosperity and legitimize their rule. The ritual, known as the Hieros Gamos, unfolded in temples adorned with symbols of abundance. The king, embodying Dumuzid, would join a priestess representing Inanna in a symbolic act meant to mirror the gods' union. This wasn't merely pageantry, it was believed to channel divine energy, binding the fertility of the land to the king's authority. When Inanna and Dumuzid united in myth, crops flourished and rivers swelled. When their human counterparts performed the rite, it was a promise to the people. The gods had blessed their ruler, and thus the kingdom would thrive. Ancient hymns describe the ceremony in vivid detail. Inanna, radiant and demanding, tests Dumuzid's worthiness before accepting him, a theme echoed in rituals where kings proved their divine favor through elaborate trials. The rite culminated in a sacred feast where the community shared in the bounty the gods had supposedly renewed. Tablets from and Yorok reveal how these celebrations coincided with planting seasons, tying the king's power directly to the earth cycles. But the sacred marriage rite wasn't just about agriculture, it was political theater at its most profound. By stepping into Dumuzid's role, a king like Shulgi of didn't just honor tradition. He became a living bridge between heaven and earth, his authority as unshakable as the gods' will. This ritual so blurred the line between mortal and divine that some kings were deified in their lifetimes, their names whispered alongside those of the pantheon. And as we'll soon see, this intertwining of myth and power extended even further into the very stones of Mesopotamia's first temples, where architecture itself echoed the gods' primordial acts of creation. From the sacred union of gods and kings, we now turn to the very foundations of divine presence on earth, the first temple. In the ancient city of Eridu, believed by the Sumerians to be the oldest city in the world, the gods themselves decreed the construction of a dwelling place that would bridge heaven and earth. This was the Iabzu, the temple dedicated to Enki, god of wisdom and fresh waters, and it became the blueprint for every ziggurat that would rise across Mesopotamia. According to myth, the plans for Iabzu were not of mortal design. Enki himself revealed the temple's sacred geometry to the priests, instructing them to build it above the Abzu, the primordial underground ocean he ruled. Its foundations were laid with rituals so precise that even the bricks were inscribed with prayers, turning each one into a conduit for divine energy. The temple's tiered structure, climbing toward the heavens, mirrored the cosmic order. Just as the gods had separated earth from sky, the ziggurat's levels symbolized the ascent from the human world to the divine. But Iabzu was more than architecture, it was a living entity. Ancient texts describe how the temple was born in a ceremonial act, its completion celebrated with offerings of precious metals and the first harvest. Priests maintained its sacred fires, believing the flickering flames carried messages to the gods. Even the temple's orientation held meaning, aligned with celestial patterns that connected it to the movements of stars and planets. This divine blueprint spread across Mesopotamia. From to Babylon, each ziggurat echoed Iabzu's design, serving as a stairway for gods to descend and a ladder for prayers to ascend. The temples became the beating hearts of cities, their towering presence a constant reminder that the gods were not distant, they dwelled among mortals, their power woven into the very stones. And as we'll see next, this sacred architecture was just the beginning. The gods didn't merely inspire buildings, they gifted humanity with laws, turning chaos into order with words as enduring as temple walls. But temples were not the only divine gifts that shaped Mesopotamian life. As cities grew and societies became more complex, the gods provided another crucial foundation for civilization laws. Among the earliest and most significant was the legal code of Nammu, the king who ruled around 2,100 years before the Common Era. According to ancient texts, Nammu did not act alone. the gods themselves, particularly Enlil, the supreme ruler of the pantheon, commanded him to establish justice and order in the land. This was no ordinary set of rules. The Code of Nammu was revolutionary for its time, replacing the old principle of vengeance with measured punishments and fines. For example, if a man accidentally broke another's bone, he would pay a fine in silver rather than suffer retaliation. The laws covered everything from property disputes to marriage contracts, reflecting a society where fairness was divinely ordained. What made these laws truly sacred was their origin. Nammu claimed they were handed down to him by the gods, much like the temple designs of Abzu. Steles inscribed with the code often depicted the king receiving them from a deity, reinforcing the idea that justice was not man-made but a celestial mandate. Even the language of the laws echoed religious reverence, opening with praises to Inanna, the moon god and patron deity of but this was more than myth-making. By anchoring laws in divine authority, Nammu ensured they carried weight beyond human enforcement. To break a law wasn't just a crime against society, it was an offense against the gods themselves. This fusion of spirituality and governance became a hallmark of Mesopotamian civilization, influencing later codes like Hammurabi's famous laws. And as we'll soon see, these legal innovations were just one part of a broader divine blueprint. The gods didn't stop at temples and laws, they also gave humanity the tools to record them, setting the stage for the next great leap in civilization. Now let's turn our attention to something that brought both gods and humans together: music. In Mesopotamian belief, the divine gift of melody and rhythm came from the goddess Nikkel, a deity associated with orchards and fertility. According to ancient hymns, it was Nikkel who first taught the gods to sing, her voice weaving through the heavens like a sweet, irresistible spell, but she didn't stop there. Legends say she shaped the earliest instruments from reeds and animal hides, crafting lyres and drums whose sounds could soothe even the most tempestuous deities. Music wasn't just entertainment in Mesopotamia, it was sacred. Temples employed entire groups of musicians and singers to perform during rituals, believing harmonious sounds could bridge the gap between the earthly and divine. The famous bull lyre of discovered in the royal cemetery, stands as proof of how deeply music was woven into their culture. Adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, this instrument wasn't just a tool for melody, it was a ceremonial object, a direct line to the gods. What's fascinating is how these musical traditions mirrored the cosmos itself. Certain hymns were tied to specific deities or celestial events, like the rising of the planet Venus or the New Year festival. Even the tuning of instruments followed mathematical precision, reflecting the same order the gods had imposed on the universe. And just as laws and temples shaped society, music became a force of unity. From royal courts to humble homes, melodies carried prayers, celebrated harvests, and told stories of the gods. So the next time you hear a song, remember, you're echoing a tradition that began millennia ago, when a goddess gifted humanity the language of the divine. But the gods weren't done bestowing gifts. Soon they would give humanity a tool even more powerful than music, one that could preserve their words for eternity. Now we arrive at a turning point in human history, the moment when words became permanent. The invention of writing in Mesopotamia wasn't just a practical breakthrough. It was a divine gift bestowed by none other than Nabu, the god of wisdom and scribes. While music carried prayers to the heavens, writing anchored them to the earth, allowing humanity to preserve knowledge across generations. Nabu, often depicted with a stylus and clay tablet, was believed to have revealed the secrets of cuneiform, the world's earliest known writing system, to priestly scribes in sacred temples. Picture this: temple courtyards buzzing with activity as these scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into damp clay, recording everything from grain shipments to epic myths. What began as simple accounting symbols soon evolved into a sophisticated script capable of capturing the full depth of human thought. But cuneiform wasn't just about keeping records. It became the backbone of Mesopotamian civilization, enabling literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh, legal codes like Hammurabi's, and even personal letters between merchants and kings. Every tablet was a testament to Nabu's wisdom, a tangible link between mortals and the divine. What's remarkable is how this invention transformed society. Temples became centers of learning where scribes studied for years to master the complex script. Kings used it to proclaim their deeds, ensuring their legacies would outlast them. And for the first time, gods could speak directly through written omens and prophecies, their words preserved for priests to interpret. So the next time you jot down a note or read a book, remember Nabu's gift. Those wedge-shaped symbols didn't just track barley and taxes, they gave humanity the power to turn whispers into echoes that still resonate today. And with writing came another divine innovation, one that would help structure time itself. Now let's turn our attention to the rhythm of the cosmos itself, the divine invention of timekeeping. Just as writing preserved human knowledge, the Mesopotamian gods gifted humanity with the calendar, a sacred system that wove together the movements of the moon, the cycles of crops, and the rituals of worship into a single tapestry of order. At the heart of this system was Inanna, the moon god, whose silver crescent marked the passage of time. Unlike our modern solar calendars, the Mesopotamians followed the moon's phases, dividing the year into 12 lunar months. Each month began with the first sighting of the new crescent, a moment so significant that temple astronomers would scan the evening sky, ready to announce the start of another sacred cycle. But this wasn't just about counting days. The calendar was a bridge between heaven and earth. Farmers relied on it to know when to plant barley before the scorching summer or when to harvest dates as the rivers swelled. Priests used it to schedule festivals honoring gods like Ishtar during the spring equinox or Marduk at the new year, when the fate of the world was ritually renewed. Even kings timed their coronations and military campaigns to align with auspicious celestial signs. What's fascinating is how the gods embedded their own stories into time itself. The waxing and waning of the moon mirrored Inanna's journey through the underworld, while the New Year's festival reenacted Marduk's victory over chaos. Every month had its own patron deity, and every day carried divine omens, whether it was favorable for building a house or declaring war. And just as the gods shaped time, time shaped humanity. The calendar became the heartbeat of civilization, synchronizing markets, taxes, and temple offerings. It turned the chaos of seasons into something predictable, something sacred. So the next time you glance at a calendar, remember those numbered squares trace their lineage back to Mesopotamian priests staring at the stars, seeking order in the heavens above to guide the lives below. With time now measured and sacred, the gods turned their attention to another tool of order, one that would arm both mortals and deities alike. But the gods knew that order could not be maintained by celestial cycles alone. Sometimes chaos had to be met with force. This brings us to the crafting of divine weapons, tools of unimaginable power forged specifically to uphold cosmic balance. At the center of this tale stands Marduk's mighty bow, a weapon unlike any other. Crafted from the bones of primordial beings and strung with the sinews of defeated chaos, this bow wasn't just a tool of war, it was a symbol of divine authority. When Marduk faced Tiamat, the bow became an extension of his will, firing arrows that split the heavens and earth alike. Yet the bow was only one part of his arsenal. The gods also gifted Marduk a net woven from the four winds, designed to ensnare Tiamat's monstrous allies. Then came the storm weapons, thunderbolts forged in the heart of the Abzu, lightning that could cleave mountains, and tempests so fierce they could scatter armies like dust. Each weapon carried a piece of the gods' collective power, a reminder that order was not passive but demanded strength to uphold. What's striking is how these weapons mirrored the gods themselves. The bow's unerring precision reflected Marduk's wisdom, while the storm's fury echoed Enlil's untamed might. Even the net, with its intricate weave, symbolized the interconnectedness of divine decrees, how one act of chaos could unravel the cosmos if not contained. But these weapons weren't just for the gods. In later myths, kings would claim their swords and spears were blessed by Marduk's example, turning earthly battles into echoes of that primordial struggle. And so, the divine arsenal became more than tools, they were promises, that as long as the gods stood watch, chaos would never have the final word. With the weapons of order now forged, the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation, one that would reshape the very fabric of existence. But even as the gods wielded their weapons to impose order, they knew chaos could never be fully extinguished, only contained. This brings us to the darker corners of Mesopotamian belief, where some divine beings took on terrifying new roles as demons. Take Pazuzu, for example. Once a wind deity, he transformed into the king of demons, a grotesque figure with the body of a man, the head of a lion, and wings like a storm. His very breath carried disease, his howls brought famine, and his presence signaled misfortune. Yet Pazuzu wasn't pure evil, he served a twisted purpose. The gods allowed his reign over lesser demons, using him as a counterbalance. When other chaotic forces grew too strong, Pazuzu's terrifying power could be unleashed to restrain them. It was a dangerous gamble, like fighting fire with fire. Then there were the Utuku, spirits born from the corpses of those who died unjustly. These vengeful beings lurked in shadows, causing nightmares and sickness unless appeased with rituals. Even the gods feared their unrestrained wrath, showing how thin the line between order and chaos truly was. What's fascinating is how these demons reflected very human fears. Pazuzu embodied the dread of plague sweeping through cities, while the Utuku gave form to the terror of untimely death. By giving these forces names and faces, Mesopotamians could confront them through amulets, incantations, and sacrifices designed to keep the darkness at bay. Yet the demons also served as reminders that no victory over chaos was permanent, and even the gods had to negotiate with forces they couldn't fully destroy. It was a humbling lesson in balance, one that echoed through every temple and household. And so, as we turn the page, we find the gods preparing for another kind of battle, one not against external chaos, but against the corruption festering within their own ranks. But the gods weren't the only ones preparing for battle. As the cosmic struggle deepened, Tiamat, the primordial mother of chaos, crafted her own monstrous legion to wage war against the divine order. These were the 7 evil gods, each one a nightmare-given form, born from her fury and despair. First among them was Kingu, her new consort and general, crowned with the Tablet of Destinies to challenge even Marduk's authority. Then came the others, serpentine beasts with venomous fangs, storm demons with tempests in their throats, and creatures whose very shadows could rot the earth. Unlike the demons we've seen before, these weren't mere spirits or twisted deities, they were living weapons forged by Tiamat's will to unmake creation itself. What's striking is how even these forces of destruction carried divine blood. The 7 evil gods weren't outsiders invading the cosmos. They were part of it, born from the same primordial waters as the gods who opposed them. This wasn't just a battle between order and chaos, but a family feud gone catastrophically wrong. Their names alone struck terror: Bashmu, the venomous serpent, Ugalu, the storm lion, and Mushasu, the dragon whose scales could deflect divine weapons. Each embodied a different aspect of Tiamat's wrath, from plague to drought to the crushing weight of the deep. Yet for all their horror, they were still her children, nursed on her anguish, shaped by her desire for vengeance. This duality fascinated the Mesopotamians. Even the most destructive forces had a place in the cosmic order, a reminder that chaos wasn't some foreign invader, but a shadow cast by creation itself. The gods might defeat Tiamat's army, but her legacy would linger in the storms that ravaged harvests, the diseases that crept through cities, and the ever-present fear that order was just a temporary victory. And so, as the stage was set for the final confrontation, The gods faced not just monsters, but a mirror of their own origins, a war where the lines between creator and destroyer blurred beyond recognition. Yet even as chaos threatened to consume the world, the gods crafted their own defenders, beings of pure protection, meant to shield creation from harm. Enter the Lamashu and Shedu, the towering guardians who stood watch at every sacred threshold. These weren't mere statues, but living spirits forged by divine hands, their very presence a barrier against evil. Picture the Lamashu first, those colossal winged bulls with human faces, their stone bodies carved at the gates of Assyrian palaces. But to the Mesopotamians, they were far more than art. Each Lamashu was a sentinel, its 5 legs symbolizing the ability to move between realms, watching over both the physical and spiritual worlds. By day, they guarded city walls. By night, their spirits roamed the unseen borders, repelling demons and misfortune. Then came the Shedu, their lion-bodied counterparts, often depicted with crowns of divinity. While Lamashu protected public spaces, Shedu watched over private homes, their images buried under doorways as invisible shields. Families would whisper prayers to them, trusting these gentle giants to turn away curses and nightmares. What's fascinating is how these spirits reflected balance in Mesopotamian belief. For every destructive force like Tiamat's monsters, the gods created a counterforce not to destroy but to preserve. The Lamashu and Shedu weren't warriors, they were wardens, embodying the idea that protection could be as powerful as conquest. Their creation myths tell of Enki and Marduk weaving magic into stone, breathing life into clay with spells so potent that even demons hesitated to cross them. Some texts describe their eyes as filled with the light of the stars, a reminder that they served the cosmos itself. And so, while temples glittered with gold and ziggurats scraped the sky, it was these silent guardians who truly held the line between order and chaos. They stood and still stand in ruins today as testaments to an ancient truth that every threat imagined by humanity could be met with an equally profound defense. Now let's step into the shadowy realm of dreams, where the gods whispered secrets to mortals through the veil of sleep. In Mesopotamian belief, dreams weren't just random visions. They were divine messages carefully orchestrated by a lesser-known but vital deity, Zakar, the god of dreams. Imagine him as the night scribe, etching celestial insights into the minds of sleepers, from kings to commoners. Zakar's role was profound. He served as a bridge between the waking world and the divine, delivering omens, warnings, and even healing visions. When a Babylonian merchant dreamt of a successful journey or a soldier foresaw battle in his sleep, it was Zakar who carried those images from the god's counsel to the human soul. Texts describe him as a silent figure, cloaked in stars, moving through the darkness to plant dreams like seeds, some fertile with truth, others tangled with riddles. What's striking is how seriously Mesopotamians took these nocturnal messages. Kings relied on dream interpreters called Baru to decode Zakar's symbols. A dream of a flood might signal divine displeasure, while an eagle soaring could mean favor from the gods. Even the famous epic of Gilgamesh hinges on dreams, Enkidu's death foretold through haunting visions sent by Zakar's hand. But dreams weren't just passive prophecies. Rituals show people actively seeking them, sleeping in temples to invite divine contact. They believed Zakar could open a door to the god's will if one knew how to listen. And so, in the hush of night, between the Lamashu's watch and the Shedu's vigilance, dreams flowed like a hidden river, carrying whispers from heaven to earth. Now let's turn our attention to something even more permanent than dreams, the very fabric of destiny itself. In the grand cosmic bureaucracy of Mesopotamian mythology, the gods didn't just send fleeting messages through dreams, they etched the fate of every being onto unshakable tablets. These weren't mere clay records but celestial decrees inscribed with the irreversible will of the divine. At the heart of this belief were the Tupi Shemoti, the tablets of fate. Imagine them as the universe's master ledger, where every king's reign, every harvest's yield, and even every individual's lifespan were recorded in cuneiform by the gods themselves. The supreme deity, whether Enlil in Sumerian tradition or Marduk in Babylon, held these tablets, symbolizing ultimate authority over the cosmos. To possess them meant to control the threads of existence, a power so great it sparked conflicts among the gods. But here's where it gets fascinating. These tablets weren't set in stone forever. Each year, during the Babylonian New Year festival, the Akitu, destiny itself, was up for renewal. In a dramatic ritual, Marduk's victory over chaos was reenacted, and the tablets were symbolically retrieved from the underworld, cleansed and rewritten. Priests chanted, statues of gods were paraded, and the king underwent a humbling ceremony to reaffirm his divine mandate. This wasn't just pageantry, it was a cosmic reset, a chance to align human fate with the gods' renewed favor. What's remarkable is how this idea mirrored Mesopotamian life. Just as scribes updated temple records, the gods revised destinies. A poor farmer's luck could change, or an empire's fortune might shift, all hinging on those celestial updates. Even the epic of Enuma Elish echoes this, with Marduk claiming the tablets after defeating Tiamat, proving that fate, much like kingship, was earned through divine order. So while dreams whispered temporary omens, the tablets of fate carved eternity into the stars, a reminder that in Mesopotamia, even destiny had its seasons. Now let's step into the Grand Council chamber of the gods, where the most critical decisions shaping the cosmos were debated and decreed. The Divine Assembly was no ordinary gathering. It was the celestial parliament of Mesopotamian mythology, a place where gods convened to deliberate on matters of cosmic order, human fate, and even divine conflicts. Picture a divine version of an ancient city's assembly, but with far higher stakes. At the head of this assembly sat the supreme deity, Enlil in Sumerian tradition, later Marduk in Babylon, acting as both king and chief executive. Surrounding them were the major gods, each representing fundamental aspects of existence. Anu overseeing the heavens, Enki governing the waters and wisdom, and Ishtar embodying love and war, among others. Lesser deities had roles too, though their voices carried less weight. Decisions required debate, persuasion, and sometimes even voting, much like a council of elders in Mesopotamian city-states. What's striking is how closely this divine bureaucracy mirrored human governance. Just as earthly kings sought approval from their advisors or assemblies, even the mightiest gods couldn't act unilaterally. When humanity grew too noisy in the Atrahasis epic, for example, the gods didn't unleash a flood until the assembly agreed. Similarly, Marduk's rise to supremacy in the Enuma Elish wasn't just through brute force. He had to win the support of the divine council first. This system wasn't just about power. It reflected Mesopotamian values of order and collective responsibility. The assembly ensured balance, preventing any one god from becoming a tyrant. Even disputes between deities, like Inanna's clashes with Enki over the Me, were settled through deliberation rather than sheer dominance. In many ways, the Divine Assembly was a celestial blueprint for human society, showing that even the gods believed in checks and balances. And just as earthly rulers leaned on their councils, the gods understood that true authority required consensus, a lesson etched not just in myth, but in the very fabric of Mesopotamian culture. Next, we'll see how these divine decisions translated into the natural world, as we explore the creation of the winds, another force shaped by the gods' collective will. Now let's turn our attention to the lifeblood of Mesopotamia itself, the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These weren't just waterways, they were divine gifts carefully crafted by the gods to sustain civilization. At the heart of this creation story stands Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters, who shaped these rivers with both purpose and generosity. According to ancient texts, Enki didn't just summon the rivers into existence, he designed them. Imagine him as a divine engineer, carving their channels into the earth and filling them with nourishing waters from the Abzu, his subterranean freshwater realm. The Tigris and Euphrates weren't random features of the landscape. They were intentional creations meant to bring fertility to the arid plains of Mesopotamia. But Enki's work didn't stop there. He didn't hoard this gift for the gods alone. Recognizing humanity's needs, he taught people how to harness the rivers through irrigation, digging canals, controlling floods, and turning the land into a lush garden. This wasn't just about survival, it was the foundation of Mesopotamia's agricultural revolution, enabling the rise of cities, trade, and culture. What's fascinating is how these rivers became sacred in their own right. The Tigris and Euphrates weren't merely resources, they were living extensions of Enki's power and benevolence. Prayers and hymns celebrated them as life-givers, and their seasonal floods were seen as divine rhythms, reminders of the gods' ongoing care for the world they shape. This myth also reveals a deeper truth about Mesopotamian beliefs. Nature and divinity were inseparable. The rivers weren't just physical entities, they were divine wills made manifest, flowing through history as both practical blessings and spiritual symbols. Next, we'll see how the gods' collaborative spirit continued in their early councils, where domains were divided and cosmic order took shape. Now, let's step into the grand assembly of the gods, where the fate of the cosmos was decided. The first divine councils were more than just meetings, they were the birthplaces of order, where the gods gathered to divide the world among themselves. Picture a celestial courtroom with the most powerful deities negotiating, debating, and sometimes clashing over their roles in the newly shaped universe. At the center of these councils stood Enlil, the storm god and king of the pantheon, whose authority was unmatched. But power wasn't handed out without tension. Enki, the clever god of wisdom and fresh waters, often challenged Enlil's decisions, advocating for his own vision of how the world should function. Then there was Inanna, the ambitious goddess of love and war, who refused to be sidelined, demanding her rightful place among the ruling elite. These gatherings weren't just about assigning domains, they revealed the intricate politics of the divine world. Enlil took command of the winds and the earth's surface, reinforcing his role as the enforcer of order. Enki, ever the strategist, secured the depths of the Abzu and the arts of civilization, ensuring his influence flowed through every aspect of human life. Meanwhile, Inanna, never one to settle, carved out her dominion over love, fertility, and warfare, proving that even among gods, ambition could reshape destinies. What's striking is how these councils mirrored human governance. Alliances formed, rivalries simmered, and compromises were struck. The gods didn't just dictate, they negotiated, showing that even in mythology, power was rarely absolute. These early meetings set the stage for the balance of divine authority, a delicate dance of cooperation and competition that would echo through Mesopotamian myths for centuries. Next, we'll see how Enlil's breath became the very winds that shaped life and destiny across the land. Now, let's turn our attention to the very air that shaped Mesopotamia's destiny, the winds born from Enlil's divine breath. Imagine the storm god exhaling, his power rippling across the land, giving life to the gentle breezes that carried seeds to fertile soil and the fierce gales that could topple empires. This wasn't just weather, it was the breath of a god, a force both nurturing and terrifying. Enlil's winds were more than natural phenomena, they were extensions of his will. When he breathed softly, farmers rejoiced as the winds pollinated their crops and filled the sails of trade ships, connecting distant cities along the Tigris and Euphrates. But when his temper flared, those same winds could become storms, tearing through fields and villages like a divine warning. The Mesopotamians saw this duality in everything, creation and destruction, order and chaos, all bound together in Enlil's gusts. What's fascinating is how deeply these winds were woven into daily life. Sailors prayed to Enlil for favorable currents, while farmers whispered thanks for the gentle drafts that cooled the scorching sun. Even the gods themselves relied on the winds. Inanna's battle standards fluttered with Enlil's power, and Enki's rivers flowed under their invisible guidance. The wind wasn't just a tool, it was a sacred thread tying heaven to earth. Yet Enlil's gift came with a lesson: balance. The same winds that filled grain stores could also bring drought, reminding humanity of their dependence on divine favor. This paradox captures the heart of Mesopotamian belief. The gods were neither purely kind nor cruel, but forces to be respected and appeased. Next, we'll witness the moon's journey across the night sky, as Nanna's silver light guides both gods and mortals through the darkness. Now, as the winds settle and the sky darkens, we turn our gaze upward to the shimmering silver light of the moon, a celestial beacon crafted by the gods themselves. This is the story of Nanna, known to the Akkadians as Sin, the radiant moon god whose journey across the night sky guided both mortals and deities through the unknown. Born to the powerful storm god Enlil and the grain goddess Ninhursag, Nanna's arrival was anything but ordinary. Legends say his mother, Ninhursag, followed Enlil into the underworld to conceive him, infusing Nanna with a unique connection to both the heavens and the realm of the dead. This duality shaped his destiny. His light was a bridge between worlds, offering comfort to those below while illuminating the paths of the divine. Each night, Nanna embarked on his celestial voyage, sailing his crescent-shaped boat across the starry expanse. The Mesopotamians saw his phases not as mere astronomy but as a divine narrative. When the moon waxed, it was Nanna gathering strength, his light growing as he prepared to rule the night. At full moon, he stood triumphant, a silver sovereign casting his glow over the land. But as the moon waned, it was said Nanna descended into the underworld, visiting his parents and renewing his power before rising once more. This cycle wasn't just myth, it was a cosmic clock. Farmers timed their harvests by his phases, priests marked sacred festivals, and travelers relied on his light for safe passage. Even the gods respected Nanna's rhythm. His daughter, Inanna, often waited for his darkest nights to begin her own celestial journeys. Yet Nanna's tale holds a deeper lesson: the inevitability of change. His constant transformation reminded the Mesopotamians that life, like the moon, moves in cycles: growth and retreat, light and shadow, all part of a grand design. Next, we'll meet the sun god Utu, whose fiery chariot brings not just daylight but divine justice to the world below. As the moon's silver glow fades into dawn, a new light rises to command the heavens. The blazing radiance of Utu, the sun god, known to the Akkadians as Shamash. Unlike the gentle cycles of Nanna, Utu's presence is constant and unwavering, a fiery charioteer who rides across the sky each day, bringing not just light but order to the world below. Born to the moon god Nanna and the fertility goddess Ninhursag, Utu inherited both his father's celestial majesty and his mother's connection to life's rhythms. But his role was singular: to serve as the all-seeing judge, the enforcer of divine justice. As his golden chariot climbed the eastern horizon, it wasn't merely daylight that spread across Mesopotamia, it was truth itself. The people believed Shamash could peer into every shadow, uncovering lies and deceit. His rays were like scales, weighing the actions of mortals and gods alike. Temples dedicated to him, like the famous Ebabar in Sippar, became centers of law and oath-taking. Witnesses swore by his name, knowing he would punish falsehoods. Even kings sought his approval, inscribing laws on stone steels beneath his symbol, the solar disk with its radiating spokes. Yet Utu's justice wasn't just about punishment. He was a protector too. Travelers prayed to him for safe passage through the scorching desert, and shepherds relied on his heat to ward off wolves at night. In one poignant myth, he aids his sister Inanna by retrieving her from the underworld, proving even the sun's light could pierce the realm of death. And when his daily journey ended in the west, Utu didn't vanish. He descended into the underworld to judge the souls of the dead, his light replaced by the flickering torches of the afterlife. This duality made him unique, a god of both the living and the departed, his justice unbroken by the cycle of day and night. Now, as the sun sets on Utu's tail, another celestial wonder prepares to take the stage, the dazzling morning star, Inanna's cosmic guise, whose rise and fall held secrets of love and war. As the last golden rays of Shamash dip below the horizon, a new light emerges in the twilight sky, not the steady glow of the sun or moon, but the shimmering dance of the morning star, the celestial form of the goddess Inanna. To the Akkadians, she was Ishtar, but whether called by her Sumerian or Babylonian name, her presence as Venus carried profound meaning. This wasn't just a planet to the Mesopotamians, it was the goddess herself, weaving between realms as both lover and warrior, her movements dictating the fates of mortals and gods alike. Inanna's dual nature shone brightest in her cosmic guise. As the morning star, she heralded the dawn with promises of vitality and desire, her bright rise signaling auspicious times for love and diplomacy. But as the evening star, she became a harbinger of conflict, her descent mirroring her own mythic journey to the underworld. This cyclical vanishing and reappearing made her uniquely liminal, a deity who straddled boundaries between heaven and earth, life and death. The Babylonians mapped her celestial path with precision, noting how Venus would disappear for months before re-emerging. They saw this as Inanna's periodic retreat to the divine assembly, where she negotiated the destinies of humankind. Her 8-year cycle, which traces a near-perfect pentagram across the sky, was sacred. Kings timed military campaigns to her morning appearances, believing her light granted victory, while priestesses performed rituals during her evening phase to channel her transformative power. Even her myths reflected this duality. In one tale, her lover Dumuzi takes her place in the underworld each year when she ascends, a poetic explanation for Venus's cyclical disappearance. Another story describes her scattering curses and blessings as she moves, her light alternately nurturing crops or withering them based on mortal deeds. For the Mesopotamians, the morning star wasn't just a celestial body. It was a divine compass guiding everything from harvests to treaties, its flickering light a reminder that even gods move to rhythms beyond human control. Now, as Inanna's star fades into the gathering dark, another force prepares to stir, the life-giving rains commanded by Ishtar, whose storms would quench the land just as the goddess's light had once nourished its people. As the shimmering presence of Inanna's morning star fades into memory, the skies above Mesopotamia grow heavy with another kind of divine power, the thunderous might of Ishtar, the storm god known to the Akkadians as a dad. Where Inanna's light had guided and judged, Ishtar's tempests brought something far more tangible, the life-giving rains that turned barren earth into fields of plenty. To the people between the Tigris and Euphrates, rain wasn't just weather. It was the breath of the gods, a sacred gift that meant the difference between famine and feast. Ishtar rode the winds atop his roaring lion dragon, wielding lightning like a scepter and shaking the heavens with his thunderous voice. Farmers watched the horizon for his approach, knowing his storms carried both blessing and danger. Too little rain and crops withered under Shamash's relentless sun. Too much and his floods could sweep away entire villages. This delicate balance made Ishtar one of the most revered and feared deities in the pantheon. Rituals to honor him were woven into the fabric of daily life. When the dry season stretched too long, priests would climb the ziggurats, chanting hymns to coax the storm god from his celestial palace. They offered barley cakes and libations, invoking his mercy with lines like, "Adad, opener of the springs, let your rains fall like honey upon the land." Even kings bowed to his power, inscribing prayers on clay tablets buried at temple foundations, begging him to let the clouds grow black as a raven's wing. But Ishtar's storms weren't just about agriculture. The Babylonians saw his rains as a form of divine justice. Floods could cleanse cities of impurity, while timely downpours rewarded piety. A hymn from Mari describes how he washes the earth like silver, purifying it for sacred rituals, and in the Epic of Atrahasis, it's Ishka who unleashes the Great Deluge, showing how even life-giving water could become an instrument of the god's wrath. As the first drops began to patter against the parched soil, villagers would raise their hands not just in relief but in recognition. Every raindrop carried the echo of Ishka's power, a reminder that in Mesopotamia, even the weather was a conversation between heaven and earth. And with the storms passing, another force would rise to take its place as the cycle of creation continued. As the last echoes of Ishka's storms fade into the earth, our journey descends into the shadowy depths of Mesopotamian belief, where the living dared not tread, but every soul was destined to go. Here, in the bleak expanse of Ereshkigal, the underworld wasn't just a realm of darkness. It was a labyrinth of waterways, each more treacherous than the last. 7 rivers carved through the land of the dead, their currents whispering secrets of the afterlife. The first of these, the Huber, wasn't merely a river, it was a sentinel. Ancient texts describe it as a river of screams, its black waters teeming with the ghosts of those who died unburied. To cross it, souls needed a ferryman, but payment wasn't in coin. It was in memory. Families left offerings on earth clay vessels of beer, loaves of bread, to ensure their loved ones had passage, failed to honor the dead, and they'd wander the Huber's banks forever, their cries lost in the murk. Beyond it lay the Id Cura, the river of judgment. Here, the souls of kings and beggars alike were stripped bare. Demons weighed their deeds not on scales but in the water itself. The wicked sank like stones, dragged into the abyss of eternal hunger. The righteous, their reflections shimmered briefly before dissolving, a sign they could journey onward. But the most feared of all was the Ereshkigal, the river of no return. Its name wasn't poetic exaggeration. Even gods hesitated at its banks. When Inanna ventured into the underworld, her sister Ereshkigal forced her to surrender her divine symbols at this very crossing, a metaphor for how death erases all earthly power. The Ereshkigal's currents didn't flow, they pulled, as if the water itself was alive with longing for the living. Yet these rivers weren't just obstacles. They were thresholds. Each bend marked a deeper surrender of the soul's former life until, by the 7th river, even the memory of sunlight faded. To Mesopotamians, this wasn't just mythology. It was a mirror. The rivers reflected their deepest fears, being forgotten, being judged, being trapped, but they also offered a strange comfort. However harsh the journey, it had order. Rules, and that, in a world where floods and droughts could strike without warning, made death feel almost familiar. As the souls of the dead drifted toward Ereshkigal's throne, one truth became clear. In Mesopotamia, even the afterlife flowed with purpose. And high above, in the land of the living, priests still poured libations into the earth, hoping their offerings might smooth the passage for those crossing the rivers below. But our next tale surges back toward the light, where the gods gifted humanity something far sweeter than oblivion. But let's leave the somber currents of the underworld behind and raise a cup to a far brighter gift from the gods. Picture this: after the toil of building cities and taming the wild, humanity deserved a celebration, and Enki, ever the generous trickster, knew just the thing. According to a delightfully playful myth etched on ancient tablets, it was Enki who first brewed beer, not just as a drink, but as a sacred offering to mark civilization's dawn. The story goes that when the gods gathered to feast after establishing order, Enki presented a golden vat of frothing beer, its aroma so intoxicating even the deities couldn't resist. But this wasn't mere revelry. Beer in Mesopotamia was a cornerstone of culture, a symbol of community, craftsmanship, and divine favor. The myth reveals something unexpected. Beer was considered a tool of civilization. Workers building ziggurats were paid in beer rations. Temples operated breweries, with priestesses overseeing the fermentation as a holy duty. Even the famous hymn to Ninhursag, the goddess of beer, doubles as a recipe, a sacred text disguised as a drinking song. Enki's gift, then, was more than a beverage. It was social glue, a way to forge bonds between gods and mortals, and a reminder that even the hardest lives deserved joy. And here's the twist: Mesopotamians believed beer had a divine spark, the bubbling fermentation. That was Enki's magic at work, a living metaphor for transformation. Just as grain became something greater, so too had humanity under the gods' guidance. Of course, the myth doesn't shy away from humor. Tablets describe overindulgent gods stumbling through the heavens, proving even deities weren't immune to beer's charms. Yet beneath the laughter lies a profound truth. In a land where water could be deadly, beer's alcoholic content made it safer to drink. Enki, the god of wisdom, had given humanity a practical blessing wrapped in celebration. So the next time you raise a glass, remember, you're partaking in a tradition as old as cities themselves, a toast first shared with the gods. Now, as the echoes of clinking cups fade, our next tale takes us to a place where divinity walked among the trees. A garden not of earthly delights, but of cosmic significance. But before we wander into this sacred grove, let's clear away any modern assumptions. This wasn't just a garden, it was a divine blueprint, a living testament to the gods' vision for harmony between nature and civilization. In the lush plains between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Mesopotamians believed the gods planted the first orchard, a place where deities strolled among towering date palms and vines heavy with fruit. Unlike later garden myths, this wasn't a paradise lost to humanity. Instead, it was a working model of abundance where every plant had a purpose: dates for sweetness, grains for bread, and herbs for healing. The garden thrived under the care of lesser gods who watered its roots from sacred springs and pruned its branches with celestial tools. What makes this myth fascinating is its practicality. While Eden's garden symbolized innocence and temptation, Mesopotamia's divine orchard reflected something far more down to earth: the ideal of cultivation. The gods didn't just create beauty, they demonstrated how to sustain life. Ancient texts describe Enki and Ninhursag designing the garden's layout, channeling water through clever irrigation, even experimenting with grafting plants. This was agriculture as divine art, a lesson passed to humanity through myth. And here's where the story takes a turn. The garden wasn't isolated, it bordered the first cities, blurring the line between wild and cultivated. Some tablets suggest kings would visit these holy groves to receive wisdom, tying earthly rule to divine order. The parallel to Eden's forbidden tree is tempting, but Mesopotamian mythology flips the script. Knowledge here wasn't hidden. It grew in the open, ripe for those willing to learn the gods' techniques. Yet the garden held darker echoes too. Just as Dumuzin's fate linked fertility to the underworld, the orchard cycles mirrored life's impermanence. Blossoms fell, fruits rotted, and drought could strike without warning. The gods' garden wasn't a static paradise. It was a reminder that even divinity couldn't escape the rhythms of decay and renewal. As we step back from these shaded boughs, our next tale awaits, one where the gods sculpt creatures not from clay or blood, but from symbols, forging animals into sacred guardians. Now, let's turn our gaze to the creatures that walked alongside the gods, beasts not just of flesh and bone, but of sacred significance. In Mesopotamian mythology, animals weren't mere background figures. They were divine companions, symbols of power, and even extensions of the gods themselves. Take the lion, for instance. This fierce predator wasn't just a king of the wild, it was the chosen mount of Ishtar, goddess of war and love. Imagine the message it sent. A deity riding a lion wasn't just majestic. It declared that even the most untamable forces of nature bowed to divine will. Lions adorned temple gates, their stone faces snarling at evil spirits, while their imagery stamped royal seals, signaling a ruler's God-given authority. Then there's the bull, a creature of raw strength and fertility. Linked to storm gods like Adad, its thunderous charge mirrored the power of tempests. But the bull's symbolism ran deeper. Its horns became the crescent moon of the god Sin, and its body, often depicted with wings or a human head, embodied the fusion of earthly and celestial realms. When Gilgamesh fought the bull of heaven, it wasn't just a monster, it was a divine instrument of judgment sent to punish human arrogance. Even lesser creatures held sacred roles. Serpents associated with Enki symbolized wisdom and healing, coiling around his staff much like later Caduceus imagery. Scorpions guarded doorways to the underworld, their venomous sting a reminder of death's inevitability. And the Anzu bird, part eagle, part lion, wasn't just a mythical hybrid, it stole the tablet of destinies, challenging the gods' order until Ninurta slew it. What's striking is how these animals blurred the line between myth and reality. Babylonians kept lions in temple precincts, feeding them as living manifestations of divine power. Rituals invoked bull imagery to ensure fertile harvests. These weren't abstract symbols, they were woven into daily worship, a reminder that the sacred walked among the mundane. As we leave these creatures behind, our next tale beckons, one where gods don't shape animals or rivers, but the very institution of kingship itself. Now, shifting our focus from sacred beasts to sacred rulers, we arrive at a cornerstone of Mesopotamian belief, the divine origins of kingship. Unlike modern notions of leadership, ancient Mesopotamians saw their kings as neither elected nor self-made, but as handpicked by the gods themselves. This wasn't just political propaganda, it was cosmic law. Take Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk. His story begins not with a coronation, but with a divine blueprint. The gods crafted him with extraordinary strength, 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a living bridge between heaven and earth, but his power came with a test. When Gilgamesh grew tyrannical, the gods didn't overthrow him. They sent in Enkidu, a wild man turned friend, to temper his arrogance. Their epic adventures, from slaying Humbaba to confronting the bull of heaven, weren't just heroic feats. They were trials by which the gods measured Gilgamesh's worthiness to rule. This pattern repeats across myths. Inanna, the first king of Kish, was chosen to bring stability when the gods grew weary of human chaos. To prove his legitimacy, he had to ascend to heaven on an eagle's back and retrieve the plant of kingship. Even failure carried meaning. When Inanna fell, it underscored a brutal truth: divine favor could be revoked. The Sumerian king list drives this home. It doesn't record mere genealogy, it chronicles kingship descending from heaven, alternating between cities as gods shifted their favor. Rulers like Lugalbanda or Shulgi didn't just claim divine ancestry, they performed sacred rituals, reenacting marriages between gods like Dumuzid and Inanna to ensure fertility and order. What's fascinating is how this theology shaped real politics. Kings weren't just administrators, they were high priests, their every decree framed as executing divine will. Temples doubled as tax centers, and laws like Hammurabi's Code opened with the king receiving justice from Shamash himself. To challenge a king wasn't just treason, it was sacrilege. As we near the end of our journey, one final decree remains, the gods' ultimate act of ordering the cosmos. Now, as we reach the grand finale of creation, the gods gather one last time to cement the foundations of the cosmos. Picture this divine assembly not as a chaotic debate, but as the ultimate legislative session where every decree etches itself into the fabric of reality. Here, order isn't just imposed, it's woven into the very laws of existence. The Mesopotamians called this cosmic balance me, a concept echoing Egypt's Mot, but with its own distinct flavor. Unlike a single principle, the me were hundreds of divine ordinances covering everything from kingship to basket weaving. But in their final act, the gods distilled these into universal constants. Enlil decreed the season's rhythms, Enki set the boundaries between fresh and salt waters. Even Ishtar's domain over love and war wasn't arbitrary. It was a carefully calibrated force to maintain equilibrium between passion and conflict. Consider Marduk's crowning achievement after defeating Tiamat. He didn't just split her body into heaven and earth, he assigned celestial markers to track time itself. The sun god Shamash was given strict duty shifts, rising and setting with military precision. The moon god Sin's phases became a celestial clock, dictating festival dates and harvests. This wasn't poetry, it was divine engineering, but here's the profound twist. Unlike other mythologies where creation ends with a perfect, unchanging world, Mesopotamian gods left room for dynamism. Annual rituals like the Babylonian New Year's festival weren't mere celebrations. They were cosmic maintenance where priests reenacted Marduk's victories to renew the god's decrees. Kings would read aloud the Enuma Elish, not just to honor the past, but to actively sustain the present. What emerges is a breathtaking vision, a universe where stability isn't passive, but a collaborative project between gods and humanity. Every plowed field honored Enki's gift of agriculture. Every court verdict mirrored Shamash's justice. Even the ziggurats, those towering stairways to heaven, weren't just temples. They were anchor points holding the cosmos together. And so, as the dust settles on our 50 tales, we're left with a revelation. For the Mesopotamians, creation wasn't a one-time event. It was an ongoing covenant, written in stars, rivers, and human deeds where every generation became co-creators of order, one prayer, one harvest, one law at a time. Which of these divine decrees resonates most with you? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into mythology's deepest mysteries. Until next time, keep exploring the stories that shaped our world. As we close this epic journey through Mesopotamian mythology, let's take a moment to see the bigger picture these 50 tales have painted. The ancient Mesopotamians didn't just see their gods as distant creators, they saw them as partners in shaping a living, breathing universe. Every sunrise, every flood of the rivers, every loaf of bread baked was part of an unbroken chain linking human life to divine will. Think about how radical this worldview was. While other cultures imagined creation as a finished masterpiece, Mesopotamia's myths presented it as a collaborative project. The gods set the rules, but humanity played its part through rituals, labor, and even justice in the courts. This wasn't mythology locked in the past, it was a manual for daily living. The ziggurats weren't just monuments, they were meeting points between heaven and earth where priests and kings renewed the cosmic order with every ceremony. And what a legacy these stories left. You can trace their echoes in later myths, from the biblical flood to the concept of divine laws, even our modern obsession with zodiac signs. That started with Marduk arranging the stars. The Mesopotamians taught us that creation isn't just about how the world began, it's about how we keep it alive through our actions. So tell us, which of these tales stuck with you? Was it Tiamat's cosmic battle, Enki's clever inventions, or perhaps the heartbreaking fate of Dumuzid? Drop your favorites in the comments and let's keep the conversation going. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into humanity's oldest stories, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next mythological adventure. Until then, keep looking for the divine in the everyday, just as the Mesopotamians did.